Good evening. I welcome you to our webinar, Preparing for the DCC's March 31st deadline in annual licensing, hosted by the City of Los Angeles Department of Cannabis Regulation. My name is Natalie Darvis, and I am the chair of the business department of Oaksterdam University, the first and longest running cannabis college in the world. I'm excited to be your moderator this evening for tonight's topics on licensure. We are here tonight because the Department of Cannabis Regulation has officially launched the Business Licensing and Compliance Assistance, or BLC program, to assist social equity applicants in the City of Los Angeles with obtaining a commercial cannabis license and operating a successful business. This series is part of broader BLC program efforts, which also include live webinars with different subjects and experts, networking events to connect you with other local LA businesses and industry leaders, checklists, worksheets, and other management tools you can download and use, self-directed online education on important topics related to running a successful cannabis business through the BLC's learning management system, which is usually referred to as the LMS, and a robust coaching program that connects applicants with seasoned cannabis industry consultants. We are dropping a link in the chat right now for you to sign up for these free to you coaching services for social equity applicants. Please visit cannabis.lacity.org for more announcements on our ever expanding BLC program. And please also save the date, June 17th, for the next Cannabis Unity event at the Mayfair Hotel. As part of the city's social equity program, the DCR has launched the BLC LMS, where you can now have access to these recorded webinars and online courses and digital resources made especially for you. Information on how to access this LMS will be in the chat. So before we get started, let's take a moment to review some housekeeping rules for tonight's webinar. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and can be viewed after the editing process on the DCR's website. You will be muted with cameras off for the duration of the webinar. This means that your camera and audio functions will not be available to you during this session. You will be able to see and hear all the panelists though. There is an open chat box where you can interact with one another for networking or comment on the information, but please use caution when sharing personal information in a public forum and keep your questions focused on tonight's topic. Please ask questions about tonight's subject matter in the Q&A box. We are gathering and responding to your questions throughout the presentation, and we will have a dedicated Q&A session in the last 30 minutes of tonight's event, where we will be joined by Jason Colleen, Assistant Executive Director of Licensing, Compliance, and Administration for the DCR. You are encouraged to utilize the Q&A box at the bottom pane of your Zoom screen, because if you use the Q&A box for your questions, everyone can see the answers. And if you have this question, many other folks likely do too. Finally, please note that tonight's content was not created by the Department of Cannabis Regulation or the City of Los Angeles, and it is for informational purposes only. This information is subject to change, and it does not replace or supersede the Los Angeles Municipal Code, nor does it constitute legal advice. If you have specific questions outside of tonight's topic, please call 213-978-0738 during their business hours, which is Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. to speak to a DCR representative. Now, I'm really excited to introduce you to tonight's speaker, attorney Lauren Vasquez, who is well known as the Fired Up Lawyer. She is a pioneering cannabis attorney and activist who has worked for nearly 2 decades to end prohibition and advance alternatives to the failed war on drugs. She has led state and local campaigns and advised numerous cannabis companies and organizations. Lauren graduated from Santa Clara University School of Law in 2009 and entered private practice in 2011. That same year, she became a professor at Oaksterdam University and is currently the chair of the legal department of the school. In 2015, Lauren served as the National Deputy Director of Communications for the Marijuana Policy Project, the organization that led and won the historic Colorado legalization campaign, first in the nation. And in 2016, Lauren was a senior advisor and statewide outreach manager for the successful Prop 64 campaign that legalized cannabis right here in California. She now assists cannabis businesses, including equity operators, with licensing and regulatory compliance. Good evening, Lauren.
Hello, thank you.
Hello, good evening.
Going to share our presentation with you folks
Great.
now. Thank you for the introduction, Natalie.
Thank
Can you
you.
see our slideshow there? Yes.
We can. It looks fantastic. I know a lot of people have a lot of questions about this topic, so we can go ahead and dive in. And let's remember, folks, that our Q&A is going to be at the end of this presentation, but I'm going to be collecting all your questions throughout Lauren's presentation. So go ahead and take it away. Thank you so much, Lauren.
Excellent. Okay, so as Natalie said, I am an attorney, but to add to the disclaimers, I am not your attorney. This is not legal advice. It's just general information. We don't know anything specific about your situation. And also, we're not going to be able to answer questions about specific applications or licenses. Like you said, we've shared the contact information. If you do have questions about you and your application and your license and your situation. So with that, I'm going to start off really big picture, and then we're going to go through a lot of detail. But just to clear up the confusion and to help everybody relax just a little bit, we have the March 31st deadline. What do you need to do by March 31st? Well, if you have an annual or provisional state license, you don't need to do anything by March 31st. If you don't have a license, you need to apply. However, only equity applicants at this point are eligible to apply. All the deadlines have passed for the non-equity applicants. So if you're an equity applicant and you don't yet have a license, you need to apply by March 31st. You also need to pay the application fee. And then that's the last chance for provisional licenses. The next deadline is June 30th. And what needs to happen by that date is that your provisional license is approved and you pay the license fee or get a fee waiver or deferral as an equity applicant. So you need to apply by the 31st, and the state needs to review and approve by June 30th. And then we have another deadline coming up in 2025, which we'll get to. So if you already have a provisional or annual license, March 31st doesn't matter to you. If you haven't applied yet, do it now. And we'll tell you about things everybody should be preparing for. This is just this specific deadline you wouldn't need to worry about, but lots of other things to keep in mind. And then I did want to clarify that provisional is state terminology. And then in Los Angeles, the equivalent type of license is called a temporary license. So many of you have temporary licenses from the city. So that was big picture. Now, as we get into the details, this is what we're going to go through. What exactly are the state annual and provisional licenses? How did we get into this? What are the annual licensing requirements? What are these timelines that you're facing? More details on what you're going to need to do. And then local impacts of sunsetting the provisional licenses, how that plays out with our dual state and local licensing system. And then we'll also talk about the all-important Form 4013 from the DCR. This is going to be critical in getting your CEQA compliance taken care of so that you can get an annual license. And for some of these topics, the annual licensing requirements from the city and Form 4013 are going to be covered in much more detail in future webinars. So keep an eye out for those. And yes, so while the city has currently temporary licenses, does not yet have a process in place for the annual licensing at the city level. However, that information is about to be released. So this is actually pretty big news. This is going to help push a lot of people forward in the process. This is what we need in order to get your annual state license. You need your annual local license. And so stay tuned for that. There's a whole process that's going to be covered in another webinar. So what are annual and provisional licenses? Well, in a nutshell, a provisional license means you can operate before you complete all the requirements. And so why do we have that? Well, it's just a holdover. So we started with temporary licenses. That's how it was written in Prop 64. And we just had to keep extending it because it's a stopgap measure to be able to allow the people who are already operating with their local license to continue operating as we transitioned into state licensing. And so at first it was temporary licenses, and that deadline came and went rather quickly. And so the legislature added provisional licenses and has continued to amend those and give more time, essentially. And so the other aspect of that is while some cities did have licensing, most did not. And many felt pressured that if they didn't pass regulations, they would alternatively just pass a ban. And we didn't want to have statewide bans proliferate. And so this intermediary license also gave the cities more time, cities and counties more time to develop their regulations and implement licensing. And so this is all in an effort to facilitate the legal cannabis industry and to get people licensed from the patchwork system that we had under Prop 215 and then MRSA, SB 420 as well. So we've been building the ship while we sail it. So this is where we're at. With the annual licenses, it's issued by the Department of Cannabis Control. It's important to note that it is not actually a separate license application. It's going to be transition from your existing license, just the status will change. And in order to get that annual license, you have to complete all state and local requirements. The state's only going to give you an annual license if you have final approval at the local level. So you're going to have to deal with all the local requirements and then the state requirements. And then once you have your annual license, it is renewable indefinitely as long as you are compliant and it doesn't get suspended or revoked, and you renew on time and pay the fee or get a waiver, then you can indefinitely renew that license while the provisionals will be sunsetting. And if you don't transition your status from provisional to annual, you won't be able to renew and you won't have a license anymore. So this is the process that everybody in the state right now is working towards. And the process of that is, if you do already have your provisional license, you really just need to communicate with the Department of Cannabis Control. You should already have a staff member that's reached out to you continuously with your deficiency notices or requests for more information. And that's the person, oh, sorry, I skipped. That's the person that you're going to want to reconnect with and ask them, what are the outstanding items on my provisional license? What do I need to finish to transition to annual? And then they'll tell you, and then they'll let you know what you need to do. And just work with them. They're here to help and just stay in communication with them. Right now, the DCC is sending out a lot of deficiency notices and notices to respond, or they're just canceling applications. So even though we have till the 31st here, and then the 30th, some people are getting these notices. So what you want to do is just stay in communication with them. If they send a notice, they can extend the due date just as long as you reply. So it's a process, and they're here to work with you. They're a resource. Okay, so why are the provisional licenses sunsetting? Why are they going away? Well, they were always supposed to go away. And as I said, we passed Prop 64 in November 2016, and the initial licensing date was January 2018. And that time period we thought would be plenty, and here we are in 2023 and we still need additional time. That's okay. It's just taken longer than necessary, and that's because a lot of things have just been in development. We had to have the bureaucracy that we're working with at the state level. The Bureau of Cannabis Control was consolidated to the Department of Cannabis Control, and so then they consolidated the regulations, and all of this has taken time. And additionally, at the local level, now most of the localities that at least want to allow cannabis at this point have their regulations in place so that applicants can get their complete local license and then get the annual license as well. Okay. All right. Going back to the timelines that I previously mentioned, now it's important to understand that if you miss these deadlines, that's okay. The difference is between getting a provisional license versus an annual license. And again, the difference is that a provisional lets you operate before you've completed all of the requirements. And in some places, that's not a big deal. It's the whole process is laid out. You can get through it. You can get your local license. You can get your annual license. However, there are places like Los Angeles, and especially also up in the Emerald Triangle, where the local licensing has not developed to allow people to get the annual license. So here we are with the provisionals, and actually the provisional deadlines already passed and were extended for the equity applicants. So you have more time to get the provisional license. You don't really have that much time after the 31st to get through June, but it is more time. And there's a lot of people who the last deadline was September, they missed it. Okay, you get a second opportunity. And also the local jurisdictions, just giving them more time. And as we announced that the city of Los Angeles has our annual process just about ready to announce and put into place. So this is where we're at with these. So March 31st, deadline to apply for a new provisional license. If you've already applied, but it hasn't been issued, you need to get it by June 30th. Now, what does getting your license mean? It means that you submit your materials, the DCC reviews and responds with a deficiency notice, and they're going to tell you what's missing. There's always going to be something missing. There's always going to be something they want to change. Sometimes it's with the diagrams. They want an arrow, they want a key, change the color of this. We can't quite tell what this is. So be prepared that it's not just submit the application and wait for them to approve it. It's a process that you will participate in with them. So again, watch out for those emails, make sure you respond and that you stay in communication with them. If you don't know what you're missing, they are required to tell you. So just email licensing at cannabis.ca.gov and ask what provisional items are outstanding, and they'll let you know. And get through whatever you can by the 30th of June to get your provisional license. Now, there's going to be some things you can't do. That's just the way it is. And they understand that. That's fine. What the DCC knows is that the DCR, the city of Los Angeles, is very working very hard to make all of this happen. And so the DCC, again, they want to work with everybody. They want people to keep their licenses. They want to promote the legal industry. So DCC and DCR are in communication about all of this, about what the city's up to, about where our equity applicants are at. And so also stay in contact with the city, working with your application process there, and watch the upcoming webinars, because there's going to be more resources, including documentation that the city will provide for you to submit and get that provisional approval. Remember, provisional approval is not total approval, but you still got to do what they tell you to do by that deadline. And then after that, you will be able to complete all of the annual requirements, which the bulk of that for most everybody is going to be CEQA. So we're going to get big into CEQA. I do want to say, though, don't wait until March 31st. Submit March 30th, because you got to pay the fee, and sometimes there's technical difficulties with the website. Also, the fee only stays in your cart for 1 day. So if you're going to put it in the cart, but somebody else is going to pay. Make sure you do it in the same day, or then you'll have to go back the next day and put it in the cart, and then they have to go and pay. It's just kind of a wonky thing. I'm not sure why they even have to remove it from the cart, but they do. So get it in early because of technical difficulties. These things happen. We're having power outages, every other day here. So please do not wait until the last minute. So, and if you do miss the deadline, you can still apply. You have to apply for an annual, and you won't be able to operate or get your annual license till every requirement is met at both the state and local level. Okay. So, this has been a process, and as the state has extended the provisional licenses, they have gradually increased the requirements for those provisional licenses and provisional renewals. And so the first date was last year, where they bumped up the requirements for cultivation licenses and added some limitations to those licenses based on size and aggregate ownership, and increased the amount of evidence you needed to submit for CEQA compliance. Not complete CEQA compliance, but progress. And so that has gradually progressed, and the requirements are going to increase more and more. So in LA, most of businesses are going to meet CEQA exemptions, and we'll get into that. That doesn't mean you don't have to file and provide the paperwork and the information. What it means is after they review, they will tell you, okay, you are exempt, you meet the requirements, you're good to go. So this comes from legislation, and if there already wasn't enough for us to all worry about and pay attention to, then here we go. The legislature said they were done with provisional extensions. However, they have introduced another bill, SB 51, and that would allow the state to renew provisional licenses for equity retailers indefinitely. So only equity licensees and only retail and indefinite renewals, but this bill hasn't been passed yet. So you're going to need to pay attention if that's going to apply to you, and just watch out to see what the DCC and what the legislature announces, because they may create more extensions, more opportunities. So there's a lot for us to go over. And I see a question in the chat, and I did want to just answer and clarify. Does this apply to all license types? By license types, we mean retail, cultivation, manufacturing, distro, yes. But only equity applicants is what we're talking about when it comes to the March 31st deadline. We're going to start talking about some of what we talk about moving forward will be applicable to also non-equity applicants, but we're really focusing on you guys because that's what this webinar is all about. And then when you are setting Zoom tried to mute me. Sorry about that. So what are these additional requirements that are being added? It's all related mostly to CEQA. Cultivation does have some limits, but you're going to need to show more progress on things that mostly apply to outdoor cultivation. So your lake and stream bed agreement, your state water board registration, those types of things. So more progress needs to be demonstrated there. Sometimes placeholders could be used, and that's no longer going to be sufficient. By placeholder, I mean a letter that says we're working on it. We're doing our best. They used to accept that, and now they want to see evidence of more progress. So that's going to be either you completed the requirements, you have emails showing you've submitted it, and they're reviewing it, and you're working with them on the back and forth of getting them what you need to meet those requirements. And then you must be moving forward on CEQA. So when you're setting up your business, you really, you want to think of the environmental considerations. And that's what CEQA is going to be all about. And we want to be sustainable industry. So as you're setting up your business, as you're setting up your operations and designing your SOPs, you want to mitigate environmental impacts anyways. That's just how we want our industry to be. So keep that in mind as you're setting up, and then that's going to help you get through the CEQA review and CEQA compliance. Also, you'll be a good operator in the industry. Okay, this is another deadline for provisional licenses. January 1st, 2025. Seems like a long way off, but it's not. This is the last day that the DCC will be able to renew a provisional license. So if your license expires on January 2nd, 2025, you're provisional, you can't get reviewed as a provisional. You need to be an annual license status by that date. So you can see how some people, your renewal is gonna come earlier in the year, earlier in 2024, and that renewal, you're gonna need to transition from provisional to annual, because even if your license goes after January 1st, it won't be able to be renewed if you're only provisional. So they'll still be valid up until 2026, but you're going to need to time your renewal to make sure that you are transitioning to annual, which requires you completing all of the requirements. So what's coming for the annual requirements? Once again, just to reiterate the deadlines, March 31st, apply and pay the fee. June 30th, get provisional approval and pay the fee or get your waiver. And what to do by your 2025 expiration date, which is going to be different for all of you, is get that DCC annual license, pay the fee or get the waiver. Also pay attention to extensions, because 2025, it could be pushed back, but also we have the bill SB 51 that would extend for retail equity applicants. So these two deadlines coming up are solid, but always keep an eye out to the future. And it seems like 2025 is far off, but this is actually what you need to be doing for 2024, which is around the corner. Here we go, right? Okay. I wanted to talk about fee waivers and deferrals at this point. So the fee waivers are for equity applicants, but not necessarily tied to your equity qualification. There's actually two different ways to qualify for a fee waiver. There's only one way to qualify as an equity applicant, and that's by getting local verification, local equity status. However, there's two ways to get a fee waiver, and that is you have local verification, or you meet the requirements in the DCC regulations. And if you have local verification, you check a box. If you don't, you're going to have to submit documentation that you meet the qualifications. What are those qualifications? It's what we're all familiar with. Do you have a previous arrest for cannabis? Do you have a previous conviction for cannabis? Do you live in a disproportionately impacted county? A few other, are you low income under certain standards? And so you can apply for the fee waiver that way and qualify. The fee waiver, you need to apply before the last minute. They have to review it. They have to put it into the system. There's a process for you going into your portal, and the fee gets, you have to select a cash payment and the fee goes in the cart and then they clear it for you. It's a process. So if you're relying on the fee waiver, do not wait until the last minute. However, the fee waiver is only for license fees, not application fees. So March 31st, you're going to pay that application fee again on the 30th, not the 31st. And then for the June deadline, that is when you would want to have your fee waiver for that very expensive annual license application fee. Excuse me, cross out annual, just license application, license fees, sorry. And then for the waivers, you only get one per calendar year. So if you have multiple licenses, pick the most expensive one and then use the waiver for that license. And then the other licenses, you'll pay the full price. Or you can apply for a deferral if you have other licenses. So deferral doesn't mean you're not going to pay. It just means you get more time to pay, which can be great. So you can also only get one deferral per calendar year. So if you have multiple licenses, you can get the fee waiver for one, you can get a deferral for another. If you have multiple, more than that, then you're stuck paying the fees. And then there is kind of I don't want to call it a glitch, but maybe it is that when you applied, if you've already submitted your application to the DCC, there is a box to check that you're applying as an equity applicant. And sometimes you didn't know you were going to apply as an equity applicant, or the requirements changed and now you qualify when you previously didn't. And so you may need to contact that person at the DCC who's working on your application with you and say, hey, I didn't check the box. Very sorry about that. But I qualify and here's the fee waiver application. Please make this happen for me. And I can't imagine that they wouldn't. So just, there's a process for getting your fee waiver. Don't wait until the last minute. And the DCC will work with you if you need them to. Sometimes it's just hard to get the proof that you need. And proof of a conviction can be a newspaper article, the police blotter, something as simple as that. But if you don't know how to prove your status, ask them and they'll help you out. So now here we are for the annual license. Again, it's not a separate application. You've got your provisional application in. We're talking about transitioning. And what are you going to need to transition? Well, there's a lot of common things that most people couldn't get done to get their annual license. And this has basically been the holdup for the situation. So CEQA, the big one, local ordinances that were still in development. We've got those happening and you're going to need to show your proof of that. The other things are more administrative. So we have a labor peace agreement requirement, which we'll get into in more detail. But you're going to need to submit a notarized statement with a state form that says you're going to comply with that. And sometimes people, don't realize, oh, I have to actually go get this notarized. And that can take a day or two, which, when you only have a day or two, that's a long time. So the other thing that you would need is a statement regarding OSHA training. If you have more than one employee, then one supervisor and one employee has to do the Cal OSHA training. And you're going to have to attest to the fact that you're going to do that. For some of the attestations, it's just going to be a checkbox at the end of the application before you sign the declaration and submit. For the labor peace agreement, it's a form with the notarized. So that's something that you're going to upload to your application as an attachment in the portal. And also I always suggest emailing the DCC person that you're working with just to let them know that you uploaded it, because they're not always paying attention. And so you want to bring their attention to it so they look at it a little bit quicker. And then also you do want to actually prepare to do the labor peace agreement or the OSHA training. 20 employees, that's a lot. It's going to go down to 10. 10 employees is still a lot. I can't imagine that most of you will have more than that, but 2, that's pretty much going to be just about everyone. And so just get started on that. And it's 30 hours. It's online. You can make it happen and get it done ahead of time. Knock it out of the way. Okay. What in the world is CEQA? Well, you're going to get a whole webinar on that next week. So please, if you can, attend that as well. So CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. This was passed during the beginning of the push for the environmental movement, and California, we're a leader on that. So we passed this law that basically means when new businesses and facilities and some other things are implemented, then there needs to be an environmental review. And that's going to look at your environmental protections, is going to look at your environmental impact. And based on that review, on your impact, you're going to have certain mitigation measures, or you're not going to have to worry about anything at all. It just depends on your premises and your type of setup. CEQA is the biggest hurdle for cultivation, especially outdoor cultivation. And then for other folks, on the other side, if you have a building that's been in existence and in compliance, and you're not making major changes to it and meet other requirements, you're going to most likely be exempt. As I said before, it doesn't mean you don't have to file or prepare anything. It just means that once you do, you're not going to have to go through the next steps. So CEQA, it doesn't just apply to cannabis, it applies to basically everything. And there's a lot of talk right now about CEQA being a big problem, not just for the cannabis industry, but also for affordable housing. There is some movement in the legislature to lessen the requirements for CEQA. And everybody from, if you are passionate about the environment or not, we are all kind of on the same page that it's not doing what it was intended to do, and it's creating hurdles that just should not be necessary. So this is a bureaucratic process that is basically the major holdup for most annual licenses here in California. What the state is going to require is proof of progress, because we're still at the provisional level. When you get to the annual license, you need to have your CEQA review complete, and either you're exempt or you did your impact report. And so right now it's just evidence of progress. And so that's going to start at the local agency. So that's DCR here in Los Angeles. And there's a specific form, 4013, project specific information form. And you're going to include the details about your operations. And it's going to get specific into, your premises description, your operations, and it's going to cover, things like the obvious, like water and electricity usage, things like lighting and odor mitigation. All of these things are going to come into play. Anything that's going to have an impact on the environment, you're going to want to detail that. And that is what can take time with these forms. Sure, you just fill in your information. No, it's actually compiling and writing out all of the descriptions and the information that they want. That's what takes up your time. Right. So DCR is part of the process with Form 4013 and the provisional into annual process is that when you submit the form, it has to go through approvals. And then once it gets those approvals, it has to go through an appeals process. And this is when the public is given the opportunity to come and speak about your license and whether or not they think it should be allowed. And so understand that you're going to be reviewed. It's a process. You're going to get your decisions back, and then it's going to go through the appeals. And once you pass the appeal, dealing with the community, then you will have your CEQA sign off. So what are we looking at here in the city of Los Angeles? Well, we don't really have too much outdoor cultivation. What we have is everything's indoors in buildings, and a lot of those buildings have been in use for years. And so you're going to qualify for an exemption. That's really what we're looking at here in LA. And so it's not so much the CEQA process that's held up LA, it's the annual licensing process. So you can get your CEQA, but that's not going to get you all the way in LA, because we just needed to continue the process and what comes after CEQA, and that's the annual licensing process. Okay, I mentioned the labor peace agreement. What is a labor peace agreement? Well, it's an agreement between a union and you as the employer that you're going to waive your rights and allow union organizing, which, okay, sounds great. Allow union organizing among your employees. And this applies to people with 20 or more employees, but it doesn't include supervisors. So what is a supervisor? A supervisor is exactly what you think it would be, but they have authority to hire, fire, discipline, and similar management responsibilities. So if your company has 20 employees, but one of them's an owner and one of them's supervisor, that's only 18. So you don't need to do it. But that is changing as of July 1st, 2024. From that date on, the number is going from 20 to 10. And so the difference in what you are going to need to do is documentation. So the DCC does provide a form. You do need to get a notarized statement, but you take this form to the notary, and you can see there's two options. The first is that you do have 20 or more employees and you will enter into the labor peace agreement, or you don't have them yet, but when you do, you will enter into an agreement within 60 days. So the notary is going to provide you with another page that has their stamp and their seal and their signature. And so with that and this form, you're going to upload those to your application in the portal, and that will complete the labor peace agreement requirement for your application. Remember, you have to actually do this part. You have to actually implement it. So if you've already got the 20 employees, it should be happening now. If you project to get there soon, start planning ahead for this one. So you only need to organize with one union. You pick one union and negotiate and work with the folks that you feel comfortable with. There are resources in the industry at the local level and with organizations like the California Cannabis Industry Association that can connect you with unions and find the right one for your category of employees, basically. So that's for the protection of your employees, and we want to be a model industry. So allowing them to unionize, encouraging them to unionize, why not? So remember, you do get 60 days after you hire that 20th or 10th one after July of next year. So there's a little bit of leeway, but again, 60 days comes and goes really quickly. Really quickly. Okay. Okay, so what are the impacts of provisional licensing sunsetting? Well, the impacts, a lot of confusion, a lot of anxiety, a lot of worry, people thinking, oh, I need to get my annual license right now, people thinking provisionals are ending forever, and no. We want to clear up the confusion. March 31st, you need to apply. June 30th, you need to get your provisional. 2025, you need to get your annual. So who is affected by the licensing process changed, this annual licensing processing change? Well, there's different categories of folks in the city that are going to be affected, because that's just the way the city is set up. So we have, some of you already have your local license, a temporary license. That's all that's available in the city of Los Angeles right now. Some of you have a license and are applying for a new one. So even if you already have a license, this deadline is going to apply to you. And then we have our recent social equity lottery winners. And then we also have legacy operators from back in the day who are allowed to operate, but their locations are non-compliant. So there's getting into compliance or relocation applications. So pretty much everybody in the city of Los Angeles is being affected by the not only the provisional sunset, but also the announcement of the annual process here in the city. Okay, so it's going to be announced in May, and I think Jason in the Q&A can confirm, but not just an announcement, but the actual annual license applications will be available in your portal. And so there you go. That's coming up right around the corner. A lot of the requirements, as we said, you can start now. You don't have to wait. There's going to be more webinars, more details on CEQA, on the Form 4013, on the annual application process in the city and preparing for DCC. So please check your inbox. We've got lots of things coming up. And one of the things to really look out for, which could take more time, more effort, possibly cause some delays, is for the on-premises retailers. You're going to have to go through a hearing, and you're going to have to prepare for NIMBY issues. So on-premises retailers, this is where the public is coming and going from, and that's going to create traffic and noise and littering and all the things, bad things they say come along with the cannabis businesses. So at those hearings, NIMBY, what is NIMBY? Not in my backyard. That means, oh, I'm really cool with this idea, but not in my backyard. Like, put it on the other side of town, you know, keep those marijuana stores away from me. And so you're going to need to prepare ahead of time for that, meaning you need to go talk to the community. You need to talk to the neighborhood association. You need to talk to the local community leaders. You need to team up with other operators, with other organizations that have, you know, similar interests, whether they're in business associations or social justice organizations. You're going to need to, you know, reach out to the community, get folks on your side, so that when you have these hearings and these folks show up, it's like, no, actually, this business is going to be a benefit to our neighborhood. And just so you know, ease some of your concerns. This is kind of like a standard thing. The city of Los Angeles is a large city, not a small town. And normally this is not going to hold you up. Maybe there's some outrageous thing and that might get you, but for the most part, you'll get through the hearing process. But it's going to be a lot easier if you work with the community, and then you'll have those good relationships moving forward as you operate and be a part of the community. So yeah, don't panic, but start getting ready, and you can make your annual license happen pretty quickly here if you do have it all set up and ready to go. Yes, more webinars are coming for you. All right, this is just to reiterate that the DCR is working with the DCC and providing the social equity applicants information for those who will need to be approved by June 30th, so that they are placed on top of the review pile. And so you want to get your Form 4013 in immediately and start that review, so that the city can tell the state that you're good to go on CEQA. And again, they're working together. You just need to stay in contact with both the city and the DCC. And again, they're your partners in this. And as long as you stay in communication, they will work with you. Okay. Paperwork. Form 4013. What do we got here? Well, you know, there we go. Form 4013. This is page 1. And this is, again, some of this is just basic information that you're going to have to enter. But what really it comes down to is the description that you have to provide. So you're going to submit this, and it's going to go through a certain process. It's going to go to the DCR, and then they're going to do an initial review, and they're going to determine if a further review is required. If a further review is not required, you're going to be recommended for approval. And if you have to do further review, you're going to have to submit all that information, and then get approved or not get approved. Depending on your type of business, you may have to do an additional type of hearing after you're approved or you're recommended for approval to get that actual approval. And the annual process webinar is going to explain further this process of how you get through step by step from not just the forms, but the actual review process. All right, and then we have page 6, skipping ahead, because we wanted to show you the categorical exemptions under CEQA. And so most common is going to be class 1, existing facilities. And really, unless you're making really major changes, you're going to be okay. There's more exemptions. This is just half the page. These exemptions are for all of CEQA, not just cannabis. And so what the city is going to do is they're going to review you for an exemption. And if you're exempt, they're going to tell you that, and that's what you want to get. And if you're not, they're going to tell you what you got to do, and you got to do it. Some of the more detailed information that you're going to need for this form. So project location and surrounding land uses, project description. That's, like, we're a 10,000 square foot warehouse on Hollywood Boulevard, and we have industrial space to the north and an empty lot to the south. We have 4 parking spots, like really getting into the description, and also the description of how you operate and your maintenance activities, because your operations, it's not just a building, it's the operations that have the impact. So you're going to have to describe all of this, and then they're going to tell you they want more information. Be prepared to submit that. And then also, along with 4013, when you get past that point, you can get your other local permits in place. So these are your standard permitting requirements that don't just apply to cannabis businesses. So like your building inspections and your fire inspection and your alarm permit and those types of things. You're going to need to make sure, if you don't already, a lot of you probably have those set up if you're operating under a temporary license. But if you don't, the 4013 is going to kick off like, okay, you've got past here, this is next step, get the rest of this in line and get your annual approval at the local level, get your annual approval at the state level. So some tips for filling out 4013. We're Oaksterdam, we're old school. We come from the cannabis movement of social justice and environmental justice. And we really want you to have a sustainable business and be environmentally conscious and friendly. And you want to showcase those features of your business, whether you're using solar or you're recirculating your water, or you're doing litter cleanup around the neighborhood, you're painting the graffiti over the graffiti on the walls, all of the things that you're going to do that are going to be a positive impact. It's going to take a long time to fill out, so make sure you're ready. Don't procrastinate. Don't wait till the last minute. The deadline is never the deadline. At least do it the day before, for technical difficulties alone, but yeah. And then you may need to hire help. So with this CEQA situation, if you end up having to do an environmental impact report, this is going to require you to hire experts, environmental consultants, and possibly land use consultants and licensing consultants and lawyers. So at that point is when you're likely going to want to step up and pay for the expert assistance that you need. You can do that now, but nobody knows your business better than you. And when my clients say, "Oh, I need to write a project description," write the project description. It's like, what's your project? You know it better than anybody else. So at the least you could start out writing out some bullet points, and then you can get an expert to help you if you want to. And then of course we have the coaching and all of the support services through the BLC and Oaksterdam. So all of those resources are here to help you. And then the upcoming informational webinar on 414, specifically about going through form 4013. And I believe that's going to be with Jason, and he's the expert on that. So going to get a lot of very good in-depth details on that. Yeah, watch your inbox. That's going to be a good one. There's going to be other webinars announced, other resources announced. Pay attention to the DCC deadlines, pay attention to the news, because, you know, the legislature's got a bill that they're looking at right now. And, you know, there's more sessions coming in. And so you just got to be aware of regulations as they get passed. We've had a lot of changes over even just the last year or so with what does it take to qualify for equity? What does it take to get a fee waiver as an equity applicant? And so just pay attention to the developments, because this is a rapidly changing industry. Nothing ever stays the same for more than a few moments. And it's daunting for all of us, not just you guys. So if you feel overwhelmed and confused, you're not alone. And we hope that we helped clear up that confusion this evening. And we are going to jump into the Q&A with Jason and myself. And so the questions that you put into the Zoom Q&A, they've been getting compiled, as well as questions in the chat. And so throw in any last minute questions you have there, right? So we can get them included. And then I want to share my contact information. I am Lauren, the Fired Up Lawyer, and I am fireduplawyer@gmail. Please feel free to email me to ask for clarifications. It's a lot. I speak kind of quickly. And so after this, if you still didn't get your question answered, reach out to me, reach out to Oaksterdam, reach out to the BLC. We're all here to support you. We really want equity applicants to succeed. And so we're here for you. And with that, I will, oh, I'm sorry, I missed a page. Very, very important page. This is the piece of paper that you're going to be getting from the City of Los Angeles that you're going to be showing to the Department of Cannabis Control for your proof of CEQA progress. You're literally going to get a form called Notice of Substantial Progress. So this is after that you have submitted your temporary application and it's complete. It's going to be reviewed, and when it's deemed complete, you'll get this letter, and then you submit Form 4013 so that you have not just substantial progress, but you complete your local environmental review. So this is what you're all aiming for when it comes to CEQA. And yeah, again, we have the May launch for annual licenses, Form 4013 webinar coming up, other webinars coming up, and all the things that you need to do to prepare and get these things in the day before the deadline. Yeah.
Or preferably more days before. Lauren, will you go back to the Notice of Substantial Progress underway? Because so I just want to also reiterate that this form that many of you have already received, because you've already received a renewal, please double check it, because most of them clearly state that your legal entity is eligible to submit a final project specific information form, which is Form 4013, which we've been talking about a lot this evening and we'll continue to talk about. So you need to submit that form if you have not already submitted it to the DCR. That is going to be your critical first step here towards annual licensure, in addition to all the other requirements that Lauren has brought up and some more requirements that the City of LA will have. So we can go ahead and advance to the slide for Q&A. And I wanted to welcome Jason Colleen. How are you doing this evening, Jason?
I'm doing well. I've been busy answering questions in the chat, so I'm going to have to take a break from that.
Yes, we're all going to focus in here, but thank you so much for joining us, Jason. Thank you so much for that valuable information, Lauren. The goal of this Q&A is to try to continue to demystify any language around this process that Lauren has just brought up or that Jason's going to be noting. So please keep your questions coming in. We have many, many questions already. I want to note to many folks, there were a lot of questions posted in the chat and the Q&A tonight that were not related to tonight's subject matter. I will not be able to ask those questions this evening. I do encourage you to reach out directly to the DCR to get those questions answered. And I also see agents of the DCR have been answering some of them along the way. Thank you so much. So let's go ahead and dive into our first question. Someone wrote, I've submitted and I'm waiting to get approval from the city for my retail license. If it's not approved before the end of the month, will I still be able to apply for the grant money once it's approved? So this one I'm going to kick to Jason.
Yeah, so my recommendation is to reach out to dcr.sep@lecity.org to talk to the social equity team about your specific situation and which grant monies you're applying for. So for social equity applicants, we are applying fee waivers or fee deferrals to social equity records to help facilitate getting them processed before the March 31st deadline. But the social equity team is administering a Seed 2.0 grant where they're providing financial assistance to folks that are already in the process and that have met certain licensing milestones that have site control for rental assistance. So it really depends on what you're talking about in terms of grant monies and what programs you're trying to get grant monies to support your business on.
Okay, great. So if you need any more clarification, drop an additional question in the chat. That question was posted by an anonymous attendee. Mitchell asked, so fees aren't actually due until 6:30. I'm going to kick that to Lauren.
So there's two fees. I'm sorry. There's an application fee and then there's the license fee. The application fee you have to pay when you apply. There's no waiver for that. The license fee, you can get a waiver or deferral for that. That is due up front. So it's called an annual license fee, meaning it's paid each year, not that it's connected to the annual license category. So your fee you have to pay every year gets paid up front as soon as your license is issued. So you need your provisional license to be issued by June 30th. That means you have to pay up front the license fee for the whole year. That's the one that you can get waived. And you want to apply for the waiver before the deadline, which you've got a couple months.
Great, thank you. And someone who is anonymous asked, will the state fee need to be paid by the 31st for provisional? Lauren, I think you just answered that, but just reiterating what Lauren just said. Christian is asking, if I submit my DCC provisional application before March 31st and get it approved before the June 30th deadline, how soon will I need to start the annual application process?
I believe you're referring to the local annual license application process. You don't need to wait. You can do them simultaneously. You sound like you're progressing rather quickly. I would suggest you do that. And Jason is going to be the one to do that webinar. And if you have anything else to add, Jason?
Yeah, the city is opening its annual application process on Monday, May 1st. And that's the earliest you could submit your local annual license application. The state is phasing out provisional licenses. So the state will not have any active provisional licenses at the beginning of 2026. And folks will not be able to renew their state provisional license beyond 2025. So it is important to get into the local annual application process as soon as you're ready to navigate through it. Our local elected officials recently amended the law to make it easier to meet the requirements so that we can adopt the environmental findings that the state requires for their annual process. And we're implementing an operating permit requirement. So we can issue an annual license based on completing the land use review, getting the necessary documents and reviewing those documents and doing the community meeting. And then once we've issued the annual license and adopted the environmental findings that the state requires, you'll have the opportunity to pursue your state annual license, get any necessary permits from building and safety, fire, LA County Public Health. And then once you've secured your state annual license and got all of your permits, you can request your final inspection. And then once you pass your final inspection, the city will issue an operating permit. But we're trying to streamline the process as much as possible so that we can move you forward into the state's process so that you don't have any unnecessary delays or holding costs. And then once you have your local license, you have peace of mind that as soon as you meet the operating requirements, you'll be eligible for your final inspection and operating permit.
Great.
Just
So
to add that that's going to be, everything that was just said is going to be part of the future webinars. So if you didn't catch it all, or it wasn't quite clear, it's going to be further explained.
yes, and just to kind of follow up on what Jason just said. So this 2026, this means that by January 1st of 2026, so basically by the end of 2025, if you do not have your annual license, you are no longer allowed to operate. So that is, you know, when Jason was talking about 2026 deadline, it's really not some point in 2026. It's really the end of 2025. You have to have completed all of your requirements for annual licensure. Otherwise, by January 1st, 2026, you will no longer be allowed to operate. And there's going to be more information presented about the annual license process starting very soon in the next couple of months. And in the meantime, if you already have your provisional license, you will be allowed to renew it for the next several years while you're working towards completing your annual license requirements. But you will have to demonstrate progress towards your CEQA environmental review. And so that is what Form 4013 is going to start for you. That is the process that everyone attending this webinar needs to get going right now. Once you submit Form 4013 and you start working on all those other requirements we talked about, like OSHA compliance, then you're going to be able to submit everything to the DCC that they need to issue your annual license. But it will require the DCR's review and approval for that process to happen. Okay, next question from Ali. I received my temporary last summer and applied for the state, but I didn't make the cut for the provisional, and now the state approves everything except CEQA. Am I able to hire an environmental company to do CEQA so I can get licensed? So I think Ali's question is really, can I go through this CEQA process without going through the DCR? I will kick this to Jason.
So one of the recommendations that City Council recently adopted was a recommendation by DCR to allow the applicant to hire their own environmental consultant to prepare the necessary environmental study. That study still has to be submitted to DCR and we have to review it. But if we agree with the findings, we could adopt it as our own, and then that could be used as evidence for the state's annual application process. Under current law, applicants cannot hire their own consultant. So we are working directly with the city attorney's office to prepare the ordinance to effectuate those changes. And I do think that they'll be adopted into local law in May or June of this year. So it's coming.
Okay, so to summarize that, Jason, you're saying it is possible that people will be able to do their own independent CEQA review if they want to pay for it, and the city may be able to adopt those findings. But right now, what the rules are saying is they're not allowed to have an independent review, but those are currently being revisited.
Correct. So local law requires DCR to do the analysis. City Council has adopted a recommendation that would allow for the applicant to hire their own environmental consultant to do the analysis. And we're just waiting for the city attorney's office to present the ordinance to implement that into local law. And I anticipate that it will be adopted by May or June of this year.
Great. All right. Thank you for that clarification. Someone who's anonymous asked, is the provisional license renewable? I'm just going to take that one. It is renewable up until 2025. And then let's remember this deadline I just noted, that the last day for any cannabis business to be operating under a provisional license in the state of California, if the laws stay the same as they are right now, is January 1st of 2026. So the provisional license is only renewable for a few more years, which means you need to start getting going on your annual licensure requirements. Okay. Stephen is asking, is this for all licensing, like retail, manufacturing, delivery, and transportation? And if we don't do the provisional now, can we apply at any time for delivery and transport? I'm going to kick this one to Lauren.
Yes, it applies to all the different license types. And yes, you can still apply for delivery transport, just as an annual license, meaning you would have to complete all the requirements before being allowed to start operating. So yes.
Great. All right. Tiana is asking, how much is the DCC fee? Isn't there a fee waiver application? So Lauren, you talked about this before, but will you briefly touch again on the fee waiver application and the fees?
Yes, the application is available on the DCC's website. It's pretty straightforward, depending on whether you already have local verification or not. Local verification, you check a box. If not, you got to submit supporting documents, and you email that to the equity department, and they review rather quickly, and then they'll tell you how to apply the waiver to your the fee in your cart.
Great, thank you so much. Someone who's anonymous asked, I think this is a good roundup question here, just to revisit this topic. What is the difference between a provisional and annual license, and does a provisional become an annual license? We'll kick this to Lauren.
Yes, a provisional becomes an annual if you complete all the requirements. So the difference is provisional means you haven't completed all the requirements, but we're going to let you operate. Annual means you've completed all the requirements, you're good to go.
Great. And I think, again, to remind everyone, this is not a different application. I think that is a common misunderstanding. This is the same application. It's just when you receive the annual license, you've completed all of the requirements. If you receive a provisional, you haven't completed all of the requirements, such as CEQA. Okay. Christian is asking, what is the estimated time frame for someone to go through the entire annual process from submitting a complete application to the DCC and the DCR? I'm going to kick this one to Jason.
I anticipate that it would take as little as 6 months, but it could take up to 18 months or longer to complete the process. At the local level, we're going to be streamlining the annual license requirements to really focus on time, place, manner, and we've eliminated the duplicative requirements from our process that is covered by the state's process. And what we're looking to do is verify land use compliance, make sure that all of the documents are in the correct form and manner, and then to allow for us to conduct the community meetings and then make a recommendation to either the director or the Cannabis Regulation Commission so that they can adopt the finding to issue an annual license and the associated environmental report. Once that happens, you would have what is necessary to have a complete state license or state license application from the local perspective. You've got local compliance underway, you've got the adopted environmental document, and then you just have to meet the plan requirements and other requirements the state has. In parallel, once you've received your local annual license, you can begin working with building and safety to make sure you have the correct certificate of occupancy, the Department of Public Health, which is a county department, to make sure you have your health permit. And then once the stars align, you have your permits and your state annual license, you can request a final inspection by DCR. And once you pass that inspection, we'll issue the operating permit that's necessary to operate within the city.
Great. Okay, I'm going to reel that back a little bit, Jason. So we're talking about 6 months versus 18 months. I want to probably quell some concerns here, because if people hear 18 months, they might start tacking this 18 months onto the usual 18 months it takes from when somebody submits their pre-application through the entire process of opening their doors. So let's confirm here, we're not adding an additional 18 months to the usual amount of time it takes any cannabis business to get their doors open from the point at which they apply through getting all the requirements.
That is correct. So
Okay.
the city council adopted a recommendation by DCR to allow for folks to immediately jump into the annual application process once their pre-application review record is deemed complete and eligible for further processing. So under the original law, folks had to go through pre-app, then they had to navigate and get temporary approval, and temporary approval was required to go through the environmental review, and then the environmental review was required to submit the annual application. Under the amended law that was recently adopted, folks can go immediately from pre-app into the annual application process, whereby they're able to submit all of the documents necessary and begin the environmental review. So once we've completed that review, we then would deem the application complete. We have a period of time to notify stakeholders and the applicant, and then we have to start the community hearings that are necessary to make a recommendation to issue the annual license. So the 18 months for the temporary approval process will be replaced with 18 months for the annual, and it's not sequential. It'll basically override it based on recently adopted changes to local law.
Great. And then the 6-month time frame is most likely for folks who already have a provisional license. So we're not talking about folks who are applying for a new cannabis activity. We're talking about folks that are already operating under a provisional license in LA right now, correct? So the 6-month time frame is for them to get through this CEQA process at the city level to qualify for their annual license.
We are really attempting to streamline our process and get people to a position where they could get into the state queue as soon as possible. So to support social equity applicants, we've been conducting the land use reviews within 7 business days of it getting submitted to us. And then that's going to get further expedited next week as we start to inch closer to the state's deadline. We'll be reviewing those records on a daily basis, and within 24 to 72 hours, we'll be making those determinations. As we're also in the process of ramping up hiring now that the city is kind of getting out of the pandemic and we're allowed to hire new applicants. So we went from a 50% vacancy rate at the beginning of this calendar year, and we're down to a 24% vacancy rate. And Michelle, as the director of the department, her expectation is we fall below 20% before the end of the fiscal year, June 30th. So bringing on all of these additional analysts and resources to support our local applicants will allow for us to expedite the review and reduce the caseload for existing analysts. So our goal is to get people through our local process to the point where we've told them they have a complete application within 90 days. And then, of course, once they have the complete application, they are eligible to start the community meetings and have us prepare a recommendation to the final decision maker. And they have the ability to get into the state's queue before they've been issued the annual license. They just have to be careful about the timing there.
Okay. And we're going to unpack that in the next webinar. So I know that what Jason just said was a lot, and there's a lot of different steps, but we will be outlining these steps in the next webinar. And just for people who maybe don't understand what you mean by this term vacancy rate, can you tell folks what you mean by that?
Yeah. So the department has 59 authorized positions.
Okay.
And at the start of the year, we had approximately 29 or 30 of the positions filled. So we had a 50% vacancy rate. We've been actively hiring folks to fill our vacancies. We had 2 people start this last pay period. We have 4 people starting next pay period. We've got job offers out for people to continue coming on board through the end over the next several months. So as we add additional bodies that are then able to support the programs and process requests, our processing times are going to improve because the caseload is going to go from over 100 per analyst to less than 100 per analyst. So we have more people processing things, so things are going to be moving a lot more quickly.
Right. So the big takeaways here, folks, are that there's going to be more people onboarded to the department to be able to deal with all this paperwork. We're hopefully going to be seeing shorter response times for everyone's needs for their licensing. And there's going to be a whole streamlined process released in May for annual licensure at the DCR level. All right, next question from Mitchell. Do equity applicants need to have a location by the 31st deadline, or is a promissory note or similar document sufficient for a provisional license? From my vantage, this question came through many times. So let's really break down our response, and I'm going to kick this one to Lauren.
Can you say the first part of the question again? I'm sorry.
No problem. Do equity applicants need to have a location by the 31st deadline? Or is a promissory note or similar document sufficient for a provisional license?
At the local level, you'll have to ask Jason about that. At the state level, yes, you can say that you have a prospective location, that you have the landlord's consent, and then you have to use that location for your premises diagrams and to meet all of the premises requirements. So that's common. And yeah, there you go.
Great. And then
And that's
Jason-
the same at the local level, is you have to propose a business premises address, and you just have to provide us with a landowner attestation, which is similar to the state's requirement, but you don't actually have to have an executed lease or site control in order to move forward at that point.
And site control would be a lease, correct, Jason? Some sort of legal document noting right to occupy the space.
Exactly.
And so a promissory note or a letter of attestation would mean that the landlord has the intention of leasing this particular spot to you and is aware of the cannabis activities that would be taking place on site.
Correct.
Great. Okay. Brittany is asking, what are the provisional and annual timelines for a social equity applicant who received an abandoned record notice back in June? So if they were given 1 year to reapply, Jason, where are they at right now? If they received an abandoned record number, what are these sort of timelines for them in terms of March 31st deadline, the annual licensing deadline? How do these apply to these folks?
So DCR made a recommendation to extend the period of time that folks can refile an abandoned record from 1 year to 3 years. And the city council adopted that recommendation. So we are not going to be closing out any of those abandoned records in advance of local law being updated to reflect that additional 2 years for folks to refile. If you're in a position where you found what you believe to be a compliant location, you have the ability to initiate the pre-application review process, and you can try to meet the state provisional deadline. If you have not identified a proposed location that you think is compliant, you have peace of mind that we will be starting the local annual process in May. You'll be able to get into that process and get local compliance and review without having site control. So make good business decisions. Like, we want you to take the necessary time to make sound business decisions to prevent yourself from taking on debt or operating costs that you don't have to do. The provisional licensing process is nice, but at the end of the day, the state will be phasing that out. And you shouldn't try to rush to get a provisional license if you're not going to be in a position to either support the holding costs necessary to get through that provisional licensure process, or be able to operate and meet all of the necessary permitting requirements to comply with local and state law.
Yes, I'm going to echo that advice, and Lauren did as well in the chat. I'm seeing a lot of folks rushing to try to meet this March 31st deadline. And I think that there's no point in rushing if you're not making a sound business decision. We know that competition is incredibly fierce in LA, and your competition is greatly tied to your location. There will be an annual license process released in May. You will be able to get your application in. So make sure that you're not just settling upon a location because of, sort of a mass hysteria about this March 31st deadline that isn't real. Yes, we will have more requirements in order to get our annual license, but we're going to have to do it anyway. So the only difference here is you started right out the gate, or you started after the fact, after you get your provisional. Okay. Where does one, so Joanne has a great question. Where does one submit Form 4013? Does it need to go to Fish and Wildlife?
So Form 4013 gets uploaded to the applicant's record on the DCR licensing portal. And then we, the city as the lead agency, start to do our review, and then we will prepare a draft environmental report. And then once we've completed that draft environmental report, it's considered to be a notice of completeness, an NOC. And then from there, the NOC gets routed to the state, and the state has a clearinghouse that allows for state agencies to provide input on that NOC. And at the local level, we'll be posting them on the DCR website so that local stakeholders have the opportunity to provide feedback on the NOC. And we'll provide, we'll allow for public comment. And then after the public comment period closes and the state has had the opportunity to provide feedback, we will prepare our final environmental report that will be submitted with the recommendation to either issue or deny an annual license. And then that will go to the first level decision maker.
Great. And so let's reel that back a little bit too. So you're going to be submitting Form 4013 into your Acela portal, correct, Jason?
That is correct.
Okay. Under what section? Where exactly in Acela will they be submitting this document?
So once they've received, so just to reel it back, under current law, folks cannot start the environmental review process until they've received temporary approval. So once we've issued temporary approval, then the record goes into the next stage of the workflow, which allows them to upload the 4013 form directly to the portal. And when they do that, their assigned analyst gets notified that the 4013 form has been uploaded and we can begin our review.
Okay.
For records that are not in the temporary approval process or have not received temporary approval, when we open up the annual application on May 1st, they'll have the ability to immediately upload a completed 4013 form so that we can immediately begin our review as part of all of the other document review.
Right. So basically, folks need to start working on their Form 4013 if they're eligible to do so, which means they already have temporary approval. So this is especially for our folks in a renewal stage right now, which is a lot of people. And starting on May 1st, they will be able to submit this through their Acela account. Confirming that with you, Jason.
Correct.
Great. Okay, so an anonymous person asked, for storefront retail locations, does that mean you can submit the application with one property and then potentially change the location during the review process? So I'm assuming what they're saying is, could they submit before the March 31st deadline and then change their location after March 31st, as long as they're getting that paperwork in and it's approved before this final deadline for the issuance of the provisional? I'll kick this one to Lauren.
I like that one.
Yeah.
You can try at the DCC level. I would ask them ahead of time. That's a question I would just directly send to the licensing department, because they are willing to work with people and things happen, things change, and you can get a lot of your requirements in and, just have to change everything you put regarding the location into your application. But if that's what you got to do, I would say at least check in with the DCC to see if it's possible.
At the local level, a pre-application review record cannot be modified or amended. So you would have to, like, if you're unable to move forward at your proposed business premises location, it could be abandoned or withdrawn. And then you'd have to start a new pre-application review record and then get a new local compliance underway notification from DCR that would then have to be provided to the state to confirm local compliance, the beginning of the environmental review process, and everything else that the state requires for their provisional license. So if you do it after 3/31, as Lauren mentioned, there's no guarantee that the state will accept that modification or change, and you will definitely have to get a new record in before the local Department of Cannabis Regulation and get your local compliance underway before the state would accept that.
Okay, great. Nicole is asking, what if we turned in our Form 4013 already? Do we wait to hear from DCR about this?
So we plan to begin posting the NOCs, the notices of completeness, on or around May 1st when we formally launch the annual application process. That will then give licensees that have submitted the form and are in a position to submit their annual license application the opportunity to start that process while the public comment period is out on the NOCs.
Okay.
So if you submitted the 4013, thank you. And you will have your 4013 reviewed, and we will be issuing NOCs in advance of the June 30th deadline the state has, because beginning on July 1st of 2023, in order to renew a provisional license, you will have to have at least an NOC from the local entity in order to renew. So the director, Michelle Garakian, has already met with Nicole Elliott in Russia to talk about how DCR is going to prioritize completing the review of the 4013 forms for any of the licensees that will have to renew their state license in July or August, to make sure that they have the documentation they need to successfully renew, because we don't want to lose any of the businesses because of this transition.
Great. So I'm gonna rephrase that. The DCR is aware of all of your renewal deadlines, and they are prioritizing the folks whose deadlines for their renewal are upcoming and are also subject to these additional requirements towards showing progress towards CEQA. So your analyst is aware of this, is aware of your deadline. Get in touch with your analyst ASAP. Make sure that you're starting this communication, and then make sure that you are ready and prepared to upload Form 4013 on May 1st if you've not already done so. If it is prepared, Jason, should they just send it to their analyst if they're not able to upload it in a seller right now?
They should connect with DCR licensing and just ask for the analyst to update the status of the record so it can be uploaded.
Okay.
If you know you're going to be renewing in July or August and you've completed the 4013 form, it's always a good idea just to ping your analyst so it's on their radar, so that we can make sure that we give you the document that you need to renew your state provisional license. And we are working hand in glove with the state on this particular issue, because neither the city nor the state wants a business to lose their ability to operate over a documentation issue.
Great. And again, I'm worried that people may interpret that as this could happen to me. So let's just note here that the state and the DCR are working together. The DCC is aware of LA's process changes. And so this is not something that's going to happen to a bunch of folks. They are going to prioritize processing everything that you need for your renewal. But that does mean that you need to start moving forward on your Form 4013 submission. Okay, folks, we have made it to the end of our Q&A period. I want to note for the record that there were several more questions and I was not able to get to them. I deeply apologize for that. I so appreciate everyone's attendance tonight and submitting so many of these excellent questions. Your questions are helping so many folks get through this process. This is only webinar 1. We are going to continue to be offering more webinars and technical assistance on this process. So please, please stay tuned. And, I want to thank you all for attending this informative webinar offered by the City of Los Angeles Department of Cannabis Regulation. This webinar recording will be found on the DCR's website, which is cannabis.lacity.org shortly. And please save the date, June 17th, for the next Cannabis Unity event at the Mayfair Hotel. If you have any questions on accessing your account, and also there were many questions this evening that were outside the scope of tonight's webinar, please email dcr.sep@lacity.org. And a reminder to please join the upcoming webinar on what is CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, that will be hosted by the DCR next week on March 30th at 6 p.m. You can register for this webinar using the link that is dropped in the chat right now. Thank you again so much for joining us. I hope you all have a wonderful evening, and I look forward to seeing all of you soon. Thank you so much, Jason. Thank you so much, Lauren. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their night.